Hey, you ready to dive deep?
Always.
Today, we're headed to Queen Mary, University of London.
Queen Mary.
Yeah, to explore how they're tackling this
Sounds interesting.
pretty big question, really. How do you change the very culture of a huge institution?
It is fascinating
Yeah.
because they're not just tweaking around the edges.
Right.
They're aiming for a systemic overhaul.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is rethinking how they assess student learning.
Okay, so we're not just talking about new textbooks or fancy classrooms here.
Yep.
This is about a fundamental shift in how the university operates.
For sure.
What sparked this whole transformation?
Well, they have this ambitious 2030 strategy,
Go
which
ahead.
was born out of some very real pressures.
Like,
New regulations in the UK, economic challenges, and the need to make sure students graduate with skills that actually lead to jobs.
so it's about making higher education.
They knew they had to evolve
Okay.
quickly.
More aligned with what the economy actually needs. But let's be honest, big strategies often gather dust on shelves.
Right.
How do they actually get people on board with this vision?
That's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
They realized that simply announcing a strategy wasn't enough.
Right.
Many staff couldn't see how this big picture plan connected to their everyday roles.
Right, that disconnect between the grand vision and the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen so many times.
Exactly. So Queen Mary took a really smart approach.
Okay.
They rolled out these very targeted leadership programs designed for specific roles within the university.
So you
had programs for module organizers,
Okay.
for program directors, for deans, each tailored to their specific responsibilities.
So it's about giving everyone the tools and the confidence to say, hey, I actually have a role to play in how this strategy unfolds. Did it work?
The impact was pretty significant.
Good.
Participants reported feeling more engaged, more valued, and more empowered to contribute to the university's evolving mission.
So they're tackling the people side of change management.
They are.
What about the actual content and teaching methods? How do they approach that?
They knew that to truly change the culture, they had to embed a culture of scholarship.
Okay.
Not just dusty research papers,
No.
but actively using research to solve real-world teaching challenges.
Interesting.
They offered courses, created fellowships, and even funded collaborative research projects, all focused on innovating teaching and learning.
I love the idea of bringing research out of the ivory tower and into the classroom. Any specific examples of how this played out?
They started using learner engagement analytics, which sounds complicated, but is actually pretty practical.
Oh,
They're analyzing data on how students interact with online materials.
I see.
This helps them identify areas where students might be struggling and then adapt their teaching accordingly.
So it's data-driven teaching, but with the goal of actually helping students succeed. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
What else did they focus on?
They dove deep into this concept of flourishing,
Flourishing.
which goes beyond just grades and academic success. It's about looking at the student's overall well-being.
So wait, flourishing is more than just good grades.
It is.
What does that actually mean in this context?
It means looking at things like mental health, social connections, a sense of purpose. They recognize that a student can get straight A's but still be struggling in other areas of their life.
Oh,
They want to create an environment where students can thrive holistically.
that's a really interesting approach.
It is.
So they're changing how they lead, embracing research and data, and focusing on student well-being.
Yep.
But we started this conversation talking about assessment. How does that all tie together?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
One of the biggest changes Queen Mary made was to embrace co-creation.
Co-creation.
They started actively involving students and staff from different departments in the decision-making process,
Uh-huh.
even when it came to things like assessment.
Well, hold on. Sharing power in academia, that's pretty radical.
Yeah.
How did that actually work?
Think about it this way. Who knows more about the student experience than the students themselves? And who understands the nuances of different departments better than the people who work in them?
Okay, I can see the logic there.
Right.
But wasn't it tricky to bring so many different voices to the table?
It definitely required a shift in mindset,
Yeah.
but they found that when you create a space for genuine dialogue and shared ownership, amazing things can happen.
You know what? I have a confession.
Oh,
When I first heard about this co-creation thing, I was skeptical.
really?
I thought, can students really contribute meaningfully to these big decisions?
I see.
But then I had an experience that totally changed my mind.
I'd love to hear about it. What happened?
I was leading a program at another university,
Uh-huh.
and we decided to bring in student leaders.
Okay.
I had years of experience, so to be honest, I was a little intimidated.
I can imagine.
But working alongside those students, hearing their passion and fresh perspectives, it was eye-opening.
It challenges the traditional power dynamics, doesn't it?
Totally.
It's not about professors dictating what students should learn, but about creating a partnership where everyone feels valued.
Exactly. And Queen Mary took this co-creation thing seriously.
They did.
They even created a SEED award to recognize student contributions to these projects.
It's brilliant.
Right.
Students gain valuable experience, boost their resumes, and everyone benefits from their insight. It's a win-win.
Totally.
But you mentioned assessment earlier. This is where Queen Mary's approach gets really interesting.
Okay.
They're not just changing who's involved in decision-making.
Yeah.
They're rethinking what assessment looks like.
Okay, so less about cramming for exams and more about...
More about demonstrating skills in a variety of ways.
Oh.
They encourage faculty to think beyond traditional exams and papers. For instance, presentations, debates, group projects. These can showcase a student's ability to communicate effectively, think critically, and collaborate skills that are highly valued in the real world.
So it's like they're saying, hey, learning happens in all sorts of ways, not just through memorization and test taking, but how do you ensure consistency? You wouldn't assess a philosophy student the same way you'd assess a nursing student, right?
Absolutely. They recognize that different disciplines have different needs.
Right.
But what unifies their approach is the focus on those graduate attributes we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Remember, those are the core values and skills Queen Mary wants their students to develop.
Like critical thinking, problem solving, communication.
Exactly.
Those transferable skills that apply across any field.
Yes.
So assessment becomes less about ticking boxes and more about demonstrating these broader competencies.
Exactly. It's about painting a holistic picture of the student's growth and potential, and this is where the student voice becomes crucial.
Okay.
Queen Mary actively involves students in conversations about assessment. They ask them, what methods do you find most meaningful? What skills do you want to showcase? It's about shifting the power dynamic from, we're the experts, you're the learners, to a more collaborative approach.
I can see how that would be incredibly empowering for students.
It is.
But did they actually change any assessment methods based on student feedback?
Oh, absolutely. One area where they've been particularly innovative is in using technology to create more engaging and interactive assessments. For example, they've experimented with virtual simulations and online platforms where students can collaborate on projects and receive real-time feedback.
So they're not throwing out traditional assessments altogether, but finding ways to make them more relevant and engaging using technology. Did they face any challenges in implementing these new assessment methods?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Change is never easy.
Right.
Some faculty were hesitant to move away from traditional methods,
I imagine.
but Queen Mary provided training and support to help them adapt.
So it wasn't just a case of, here's a new system, good luck. They actually invested in getting buy-in from the people who would be using it.
Exactly. They also encouraged those communities of practice we talked about, where faculty could share ideas and best practices, learn from each other, and support each other through the process.
The power of peer learning. It's one thing to hear about a new approach from an administrator. It's another to see how your colleagues are actually using it in their classrooms.
You got it, and don't forget the students.
Right.
They were actively involved in evaluating the new assessment methods and providing feedback.
It's amazing how Queen Mary keeps bringing it back to student empowerment.
Yeah.
It's not just a buzzword for them. It seems woven into everything they do.
It really is. They're walking the walk. So we've seen how Queen Mary is changing leadership, embracing research, prioritizing student well-being, and rethinking assessment. What are the big takeaways here? What can other universities learn from their experience?
I think it boils down to this. They're not afraid to challenge the status quo. They're asking the tough questions about what higher education should look like in the 21st century, and then taking bold steps to find the answers.
And they're doing it in a way that's both strategic and human-centered.
Yeah.
They're not just implementing top-down mandates. They're creating a culture of collaboration, trust, and continuous learning.
They're showing that real change requires a shift in mindset, a willingness to experiment, and a deep commitment to the well-being and empowerment of both students and staff.
If I could sum it up in a few words, I'd say Queen Mary's approach is all about empowerment collaboration, evidence-informed practice, continuous learning, and putting the student at the center of it all.
It's a powerful model that goes way beyond just higher education. These are principles that any organization facing disruption and uncertainty can learn from.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's the question we'll leave you with. Where do you see the need for change in your own world?
What outdated systems or mindsets are holding us back? And what can you do, even in a small way, to start shifting the culture towards something more innovative, inclusive, and human-centered?
Change can feel daunting, but remember, Queen Mary didn't transform overnight.
True.
It was a process of small steps, constant iteration, and learning from both successes and failures.
So don't be afraid to experiment, to challenge assumptions, and to believe that a better future is possible.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah.
Find your people, build a community, and support each other along the way, because as Queen Mary has shown us, transformation is a team sport.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing for positive change.